Excuses are fascinating, not because they're useful, but because they're clever. They're dressed up in logic, coated in good reasoning, and they sound just fine at first. I'm too tired. It's just not the right time. I didn't grow up with the right resources. These are not just words. These are tiny lies that we repeat to ourselves until they start sounding like the truth. But deep down we know it's not because we can't. It's because we've convinced ourselves we don't have to. That's the damage an excuse causes. It gives you permission to stay the same while pretending you're being smart. People don't fail because they lack ability. People fail because they justify their inaction, and the more convincing the excuse, the more dangerous it becomes. See, the mind is powerful. If you tell it a lie long enough, it will believe it, and if it believes it, it will behave as if it were true. That's the danger of these well-crafted lies. They become your worldview. They set up camp in your routines. They sit on your shoulder in the morning and tell you to snooze. They whisper in your ear when it's time to act and say, "Let's wait until next week." They seem like your friends, but they're robbing your future. You've got to be careful with the kind of excuses that feel noble. I just want to wait until I can do it right. That one sounds mature, doesn't it? But it's not. It's fear wearing a suit and tie. I'll start after I get a few more things lined up. Sounds organized, doesn't it? But again, it's hesitation disguised as preparation. Preparation is good, but not when it becomes your hiding place. The only way to know if an excuse is legitimate is to ask yourself one question: is this moving me forward, or is this protecting me from discomfort? If it's the second one, it's a lie no matter how good it sounds. There was once a man who said, "I could have been great if only life had given me a fair shot." He believed that. But he never once asked himself if he'd taken the shots that were available. No one gets a fair shot. You either make it work with what you've got, or you sit and wait for conditions that never come. That's what excuses do. They convince you that your moment is sometime in the future. So you wait, and you wait, and before you know it, your whole life has turned into a waiting room. Now, here's something to consider. If someone followed you around with a notepad and recorded every reason you gave for not moving forward, every excuse, every delay, every complaint, and then handed it back to you in a report, would you be proud of it? Would you look at those pages and say, "Yes, that sounds like the person I want to be"? Probably not. That's the sobering truth. Excuses always look worse in writing than they sound in our minds. And they sound fine until we realize someone else with less time, fewer resources, and more challenges went out and did the very thing we said we couldn't do. Excuses are clever. They know how to adapt. In your 20s, they tell you you're too young. In your 30s, they say you've missed your chance. In your 40s, they remind you of all the past failures. In your 50s, they whisper that it's too late. They evolve with you, growing as you grow, but they never help you grow. They only keep you stuck in the same spot, giving the illusion of motion while you're standing still. So what's the antidote? It starts with brutal honesty, not the kind of honesty that makes you feel good, the kind that wakes you up. The kind that stands in front of the mirror and says, "That's not the real reason, and I know it." Most people don't need more time. They don't need more resources. They need less lying to themselves, because the moment you stop making excuses, you stop giving your limitations authority. You take back your power. You stop negotiating with your dreams and start working for them. And that shift, that inner rebellion against your own excuses, is what creates real change. Excuses don't charge you interest. They don't send you a bill in the mail. That's what makes them so dangerous. They cost you in silence. No alarms go off, no red lights flash, but every time you give in to one, a piece of your potential quietly slips away. And you won't notice it today, not tomorrow. But months later, years even, you'll look back and wonder where all the time, energy, and opportunity went, and the answer will be simple. They were lost one excuse at a time. It doesn't happen with a big moment. It happens in small decisions. The day you told yourself, "I'll start tomorrow." The morning you said, "Just this once, I'll skip it." The evening you justified scrolling instead of studying, delaying instead of daring. Each one feels like nothing, but together they become everything. Your habits become your life, and excuses shape those habits. That's the deal, that's the price. Your excuses today shape your limits tomorrow. Now, you might think the problem is time or circumstance. Maybe you believe it's the environment you were raised in. Maybe you think if you had more support, more encouragement, or a different starting point, things would be different. But here's the hard truth. You don't get to choose where you start, but you do choose whether to stay there. And if you stay, it's not because of where you were born, or who hurt you, or what you didn't have. It's because you bought into a narrative that gave you permission to stop trying. Every human being is born with a measure of potential, a seed. That seed has no guarantees. It doesn't bloom automatically. It doesn't grow just because you hope it will. It grows when it's fed. It grows when it's nurtured, stretched, tested. And the moment you begin making excuses, you stop feeding the seed. You put a lid on it. You tell it, "We'll try later," or "We're not capable." And eventually, the seed accepts that you've chosen comfort over growth. Comfort is not bad. Everyone needs rest. But when comfort becomes your home instead of your pit stop, potential suffocates. It cannot breathe in an environment where excuses dominate. And the tricky part is, excuses feel like self-care. I'm protecting myself. I'm being realistic. But there's a line where protection turns into paralysis. That's the line you have to recognize, the point where wisdom turns into fear disguised as logic. I've seen people defend their excuses like they were family. They guard them, protect them, even fight for them. You don't understand what I've been through. You don't know how hard it is for me. And maybe that's true. Maybe it is harder for you, but let me tell you something. Your future doesn't care about your excuses. Success doesn't adjust itself to fit your comfort zone. It waits for you to rise up and meet it. Potential is not just talent. It's not just what you're capable of doing. It's what you were born to become, but only if you're willing to pay the price. And that price is discomfort, that price is effort, that price is looking your excuses in the eye and saying, "Not today." That price is responsibility. The day you stop blaming, the day you stop justifying, is the day your potential stops dying and starts growing again. And don't think this is just about careers or money. This applies to relationships, to health, to personal growth. The excuse of "I don't have time" is not just robbing your bank account. It's robbing your relationships with your children, your spouse, your health, your peace of mind. Every "I'll do it later" is a gamble, and the stakes are high because later is never guaranteed. You don't need a bigger opportunity, you need a better mindset. You don't need everything to be perfect, you need to start anyway. You don't need everyone to support you, you need to stop making excuses that give you permission to play small. Playing small might feel safe, but it's expensive. It costs you the version of you that could have been built. It costs you the legacy you could have left. It costs you the joy that only comes from living fully aligned with your abilities and purpose. If you could fast forward to the end of your life and see what your potential could have been, the impact, the people you could have helped, the skills you could have mastered, the peace you could have known, and then see it all locked behind a wall made of excuses, you'd cry, not because you weren't good enough, but because you traded what was possible for what was comfortable, because the price of excuses is not measured in days wasted, it's measured in lives unlived. There is a turning point in every life, a moment when you stop blaming the world and start asking yourself the hard questions. That moment is where real success begins, not when you get a new opportunity, not when someone discovers your talent, not when the economy shifts in your favor. No, it begins the moment you look in the mirror and finally stop lying to yourself, because as long as you keep lying, success will keep running. It cannot live in a mind that refuses truth. Most people don't fail because of lack of intelligence. They fail because of lack of honesty. They're not honest about how much time they waste. They're not honest about how often they quit. They're not honest about how afraid they are to be uncomfortable, and so they build a life around denial, denial of responsibility, denial of discipline, denial of consistency. But life doesn't reward denial, it rewards truth. And the first truth that opens the gates to change is this: I am where I am because of what I've chosen, tolerated, and repeated. The person who becomes successful is the one who can sit alone with their thoughts and admit where they've fallen short. It's the one who can say, that wasn't bad luck, that was laziness, that wasn't someone else's fault, that was mine. See, we live in a culture that teaches us to look outward, blame the system, blame the past, blame the weather. But that path leads to powerlessness. The more you blame, the more you give your power away. And the more you give your power away, the more your future slips through your fingers. Facing yourself honestly doesn't mean beating yourself up. It doesn't mean walking around in guilt. It means looking at your habits, your mindset, your choices, and saying, here's where I need to grow. That's maturity. That's personal responsibility. That's the beginning of every breakthrough. And the people who never get their breakthrough, they're the ones who are always almost ready, always working on it, always explaining why it's harder for them. But the truth is, they've gotten too good at fooling themselves. Here's the thing about fooling yourself: you become comfortable with things that should disturb you. You start believing that being tired is a good enough reason to stay undisciplined. You start accepting the idea that your past failures mean your future is limited. You begin to tolerate low standards. And when you tolerate something long enough, it becomes invisible. It blends into the background of your life, and you don't even notice you're living far below your potential. That's what happens when you don't face yourself honestly. You lose sight of who you could be. Success demands clarity, and clarity demands truth. You cannot build a strong life on a weak foundation of lies. You can't say, "I'm doing my best," when you know you're cutting corners. You can't say, "I'm just unlucky," when you haven't shown up fully. Every time you say something that sounds good but isn't true, you build a wall between where you are and where you could be. And that wall won't come down until you decide you've had enough of pretending. Now, let's talk about the magic that happens when you do face yourself. When you finally tell yourself the truth, you take back control. Suddenly, you stop waiting for someone to save you, and you start building your own ladder. You stop chasing quick fixes and start working on your foundation. You start asking better questions, not "Why is this so hard?" but "What am I doing to make it harder?" Not "Why can't I catch a break?" but "What habits are keeping me stuck?" These questions may be uncomfortable, but they lead you forward. They give you power, and power is the engine of success. Facing yourself also means taking full inventory of your excuses, writing them down, reading them aloud, and then asking yourself, "Is this the kind of person I want to be?" Because your excuses don't define you unless you let them. The moment you stop believing your excuses is the moment you start believing in your ability to change. But that shift only comes after truth, not truth from your friends, not truth from a book, but truth from yourself to yourself. Most people will never achieve greatness, not because they don't have it in them, but because they're too afraid to confront the parts of themselves that are keeping them small. They'd rather wear a mask than face the mirror. They'd rather look successful on the outside than clean up what's broken on the inside. But true success, it's built from the inside out. It's born from the kind of honesty that strips away ego, tears down denial, and says, "Let's build something real this time." There's something incredibly deceptive about time. When you're young, it feels unlimited. You tell yourself there's plenty of time, and so you delay. You postpone your dreams. You wait for better conditions, for the perfect moment, for everything to feel just right. But time is not your employee. It doesn't answer to your convenience. And while you're busy negotiating with your fears, while you're making plans to start later, your future is getting tired of waiting. Opportunities don't stick around forever. They appear, they shine for a moment, and then they vanish. They pass by those who hesitate, and they're captured by those who are ready, not perfect, not fully prepared, but ready. That's the mistake most people make. They think opportunity will circle back. They think if they miss it today, it'll come again next month. But life isn't obligated to give you multiple chances. Sometimes it does, sure, but more often it rewards the ones who act when others are still thinking about it. Your future doesn't wait for your mood to change. It doesn't pause while you get over your doubts. It's not sitting in the corner with a stopwatch, timing how long you'll need to feel motivated enough to move. It moves forward, with or without you, and the harsh reality is if you're not moving with it, you're falling behind. That's why procrastination is so dangerous. It doesn't feel dangerous. It feels harmless. It feels like you're just giving yourself some space, some breathing room. But all it's doing is quietly subtracting from the life you could have had. People often say, "I'll start when I'm ready," but what does ready even mean? Ready rarely comes. Ready is an illusion. Most of the people you admire started long before they felt ready. They began when they were uncertain, when they were afraid, when they weren't sure how it would turn out. They understood something most people don't. Action creates clarity. Waiting creates confusion. You don't get clear before you move. You get clear because you moved. The idea that your future will politely wait for you is one of the most damaging beliefs you can carry. Your potential has an expiration date, not because you lose your abilities over time, but because your window of influence, your ability to shape your life and affect others, is not infinite. You can't live forever, and you don't know how long your season of strength, health, or energy will last. That's why urgency matters, not panic, not chaos. Urgency, the quiet, steady pressure that reminds you this moment counts. Think about all the things you've told yourself you would do one day. How many of those things have you actually done? If you're not careful, one day becomes no day. Life has a way of moving faster than we expect. Responsibilities pile up. Distractions increase, and without even realizing it, 5 years pass, then 10, and you're still telling yourself the same story. Still waiting for that mysterious right time that never seems to show up. People assume the future is guaranteed. They plan for it, they talk about it, they dream about it, but they forget that the only way to reach it is through disciplined, consistent action in the present. Every day you delay is a day you trade away from your future, and here's the part that hurts the most. The future you want isn't disappearing into thin air. Someone else is building it, someone else who didn't wait, someone else who didn't negotiate with fear. Someone else who showed up again and again, even when it was hard, even when it wasn't perfect. There's a consequence to waiting that most people don't calculate. It's not just lost time, it's lost growth. Every time you delay action, you delay the lessons, the skills, the resilience you would have gained by doing. And without those lessons, you remain the same. And when you remain the same, your future gets further out of reach, because your future requires a different version of you, a wiser you, a more disciplined you, and that version only appears through action, not through wishing. Success is not built in some distant place you'll magically arrive at. It's built daily, quietly, incrementally. While you're doing the work others are putting off, while you're taking the steps others are still debating. Your future isn't waiting to see how you feel, it's waiting to see what you do. And every day you hesitate, it takes one step further away, not out of cruelty, but because time has no patience. It moves, it passes, it rewards the prepared and punishes the passive. The uncomfortable truth is, most people will miss their future not because they weren't capable, but because they were too busy getting ready instead of getting started. Discipline is the quiet force that builds empires while others sleep through their dreams. It doesn't shout. It doesn't beg for attention. It just shows up day after day, whether you feel like it or not. Discipline is not glamorous. It doesn't come with applause, but it's the one thing that separates the person who talks about change from the one who actually makes it. Excuses are loud, they're dramatic, they always have a story, always have a reason, always have a justification. But discipline doesn't explain, it executes. There's a myth that success is all about passion, that you've got to feel inspired, driven, motivated every day, that you need to wake up with fire in your belly and stars in your eyes. But what happens when you don't feel inspired? What happens when the excitement fades, when the results are slow, when no one's cheering you on? That's where discipline steps in. Passion starts the engine, but discipline keeps the wheels turning when the road gets rough and the scenery is dull. Excuses are always waiting for the right time. They say, not today, maybe tomorrow, but discipline says now. It doesn't negotiate with emotions. It doesn't wait for ideal conditions. It acts regardless of how the weather feels, regardless of what your friends are doing, regardless of what mood you're in. Discipline says, this is who I am, and this is what I do, even when the body is tired and the mind is full of doubt. That's the power that makes dreams real, not hope, not hype, but habit. When you rely on motivation, you give power to how you feel. And feelings are unreliable. They rise and fall like the tide. But when you build your life on discipline, you take power away from your excuses. You take your power back from your fears. You say, I'm not driven by what's easy. I'm driven by what's necessary. You don't leave your future in the hands of how you feel when you wake up. You build systems that carry you forward regardless. Excuses are comfortable. They wrap you up like a warm blanket on a cold morning. They tell you it's okay to stay where you are, but comfort is the enemy of growth, and discipline understands that. Discipline tears the blanket off and gets your feet on the floor, not because it's easy, but because it's right. Because 5 minutes of discipline in the morning can change the entire direction of your day. Because one small act of follow-through can rebuild your belief in yourself. The mind loves to rationalize. It loves to say, I'll double the work tomorrow, or this one time won't matter. But that's how mediocrity is built, one exception at a time. Discipline is the opposite. It builds greatness one repetition at a time, one step at a time, one decision at a time. No fanfare, no noise, just the daily choice to keep showing up. And that kind of consistency is more powerful than talent, more valuable than connections, and more rare than intelligence. Because everyone can be disciplined, but not everyone chooses to be. People often ask how to kill the excuse habit. The answer is simple, but not easy. You replace it with a discipline habit. You stop asking if you feel like it. You stop entertaining the conversation in your head that looks for reasons to quit. You set a standard and you live by it. That's discipline. It's not about perfection. It's about persistence. You'll mess up sometimes. You'll fall short. But discipline doesn't disappear just because you had a bad day. It resets. It recalibrates. It returns the next morning and says, let's begin again. Discipline trains the mind to trust itself. Every time you do what you said you would do, even when it's hard, you build internal credibility. You become someone you can count on, and when you can count on yourself, excuses lose their power. They become background noise. They don't disappear. They just get drowned out by the voice of discipline that says, we have work to do. There's a strength that grows in disciplined people, a kind of quiet confidence. They don't need to talk about how committed they are. You can see it in how they live. You can see it in the early mornings, the extra effort, the skipped temptations, the focused days. Discipline leaves a trail. It creates momentum. And that momentum is what carries you through the valleys, through the setbacks, through the doubt. Excuses always look for a way out. Discipline always finds a way through. You'll never meet a truly successful person who didn't master discipline. Not once, not for a week, but over time, over years, over a lifetime, they made a decision that their future was more important than their comfort. that their goals mattered more than their excuses, that showing up was more powerful than showing off. Because discipline isn't loud, but the life it builds is, excuses may sound reasonable, they may feel safe, but they are the silent thieves of your future. Every time you defend one, you delay the life you could be living. The dreams you carry, the potential inside you, the future that calls you, they're not waiting for the perfect moment. They're waiting for a different you, a version of you that chooses truth over comfort, that confronts laziness with honesty, that trades waiting for action and excuses for discipline. It doesn't take a miracle to change your life. It takes responsibility. It takes urgency. It takes looking yourself in the eye and saying, no more lies, no more delays, no more giving my power away to stories that keep me small. Success is built in the quiet places, in the choices no one sees, in the early mornings, in the uncomfortable decisions, in the repeated actions that say, I am becoming more. Excuses destroy your future, but only if you let them, and the moment you decide you've had enough waiting, enough explaining, enough hiding, is the moment everything begins to shift. The future you want is not impossible, it's just on the other side of your excuses. Burn the bridge. Step forward and never look back.